Dana White has just announced the entire main card for UFC Abu Dhabi on August 3rd. Now, this right above me, Nick Diaz and Vicente Luque, is obviously the most surprising and the biggest announcement for that card, but we're going to go through the rest of the announcements that Dana White put up, and I'm going to give you my initial thoughts and reactions to this Abu Dhabi card because it is more stacked than some of the pay-per-views we've had. First off, we'll start with Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar has finagled his way into the rankings after getting dropped by a UFC debuter and unranked opponent. He sneaks his way into the rankings off of that win, which was over Khamzat Chimaev. He then somehow floats his way up to number 9 in the rankings without winning any fights or just sitting there. And then he gets announced that he's going to be fighting Cory Sandhagen, the number 2 ranked bantamweight behind champion Sean O'Malley and number 1 contender Merab Dvalishvili. So he goes from unranked, 0 ranked wins into the rankings, bounces up to number 9, and now he's getting a number 1 contenders fight in Abu Dhabi. This fight was supposed to originally happen last August in Nashville, and Umar pulled out of the fight. Cory ends up fighting Rob Font. Umar ends up getting the ridiculous, undeserved matchup anyway in Abu Dhabi. Doesn't have to travel as far, can do a cycle of steroids in my opinion. Yeah, so he bounces his way to a number 1 contenders fight after essentially not earning it. And it's crazy to think that some of you in my comments push back when I say that Dagestanis have privilege. So we already knew about this one because this was going to be the main event. But the big announcements that I wanted to get into are the other fights that were announced for this card. First off is a 5-round co-main event, Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz making his first appearance since 2021, where he lost to Robbie Lawler at 185 pounds, which I'm pretty sure was on the Brian Ortega and Volkanovski card in 2021. He looked absolutely terrible, quit in that fight. Didn't want to be there, decided he wasn't going to make the weight cut, and they changed it from 170 to 185 during fight week. Vicente Luque looked dog shit in his last fight too. Completely quit against Joaquin Buckley on the Atlantic City card. You know, and given that they've also put Tony Ferguson on this card, which we'll get to in a minute, I'm really confused that this fight for Nick Diaz is not against Tony Ferguson. Seemed like a perfect name value and skill level matchup. You know, you have inactive Nick Diaz versus 7-fight losing streak Tony Ferguson. But maybe Nick Diaz actually wants to get in there and try to work his way towards a title shot, which would make sense if that was the case because they put him up against a ranked welterweight in Vicente Luque. We'll see what happens. Vicente Luque looked terrible in his last fight. If he has the same kind of quit in him that he had against Joaquin Buckley, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Nick Diaz get a win and at 40 years old become a ranked welterweight. It was rumored that he was pushing for a GSP fight, which GSP did not entertain. It was rumored that he was pushing for a Colby Covington fight, which he obviously did not get. It was also rumored that he was looking for a Kevin Holland fight, which Kevin Holland said this week that they promised him that fight after this Mikel Olajasic at 302 fight. But here they go during 302 fight week, announcing him against Vicente Luque. So obviously Kevin Holland did not get that fight. Nick Diaz was also interested in fighting Michael Venom Page, which obviously didn't happen because Michael Venom Page is going to be fighting Ian Gary on the Conor McGregor card, which is in about 4 weeks' time. We'll see what happens here. 5-round co-main, 5 rounds definitely plays in the Diaz's favor, as we've seen. As long as the Diaz's have time, they always have a chance. They always build momentum as the fight goes on. I'm interested in this matchup, but I'm more interested in just how Nick Diaz is going to look. I wish they would have booked him against Tony Ferguson. We move on from there. What was originally supposed to be the co-main event, which is now just going to be a main card fight. You have Marlon Chito Vera looking to bounce back from his UFC 299 loss to Sean O'Malley against the former flyweight champion Deiveson Figueiredo, who quite frankly deserves the number 1 contender fight with Cory Sandhagen a whole lot more than Umar Nurmagomedov does. But anyways, here we are. Chito versus Deiveson Figueiredo should be a fun fight. Going to happen mostly on the feet. I might actually go with Chito in this one, but I got to watch some more fights and see what I think about it as the fight comes closer. Obviously I'll do my prediction videos and things like that. But just from a size difference, because Deiveson Figueiredo is a former flyweight, Chito Vera is a hard-hitting very big bantamweight. He actually struggles to make bantamweight at times, I think. So the physicality could play a huge role in this fight, but we'll see. Deiveson Figueiredo's speed and cardio increase from not having to cut to 125 could be the difference in this fight, but I'm very interested in this matchup as well. Moving on from there, we have Tony Ferguson against Michael Chiesa, which this fight doesn't really make much sense. You have Chiesa, the commentator, and Tony with 7 losses in a row. Like I mentioned earlier, they should have done this fight. They literally could have just switched the arrangement of these fights. You could have done Tony and Nick Diaz, 5-round co-main, and then you could have done Vicente Luque, Michael Chiesa, something like that. But Michael Chiesa, this might be a retirement fight for both of them. Tony might fight forever, but Michael Chiesa is not committed to fighting anymore. He got absolutely smoked by Kevin Holland, and he was super inactive before that. He's a commentator. He's doing that most of the time now. And I would not be surprised to see Chiesa retire with a loss, or both of them retire regardless of outcome. I worry a little bit about Tony fighting at 170, given that he has mostly been a 155er, even though originally he was a 170-pounder. I think that Chiesa, you know what? I take it back. They were both former 155ers. I think Tony has a good shot here, given that Chiesa has pillow hands. He's not very quick. And I think that this is a good fight for Tony to at least not get KO'd. You know, this is not a Michael Chandler matchup, and it's a better matchup to possibly get Tony a win. We move on from there. Another announcement for this card. We have Mackenzie Dern versus Loopy Godinez. And interesting matchup because you have Loopy Godinez fighting up in the rankings after taking a loss to Virna Jandiroba, which I believe was the Atlantic City card. Possibly, yeah, the Atlantic City card. But she's a fantastic boxer. Mackenzie Dern is god-awful on the feet. And Loopy Godinez definitely held her own against a very tricky and skilled grappler in Virna Jandiroba in her last fight, although she came out with a loss. So I'm definitely going to lean towards Loopy Godinez in this fight, given how terrible Mackenzie Dern is on the feet. She blocks punches with her face. Godinez has that typical Mexican boxing style, very aggressive on the front foot. I could see Godinez getting a standing TKO up against the fence against Mackenzie Dern in this fight, but I will come with an official prediction during fight week. One other addition to the card that was not announced by Dana White, but it was released on the same day. You have Alonzo Menifield against Azamat Murzakanov. You have 2 ranked light heavyweights, number 13 and number 14. Alonzo Menifield just got KO'd in about 10 seconds on the St. Louis card against Carlos Ulberg, who is now taking on Jamal Hill on the main card. Not sure if it's going to be the co-main event anymore of UFC 303, McGregor versus Chandler. Good bounce back fight for Alonzo Menifield. He did get TKO'd against Carlos Ulberg. He looked way overly aggressive in that fight. He looked absolutely awful. And that's what happens when you have Pat Barry as your cornerman. You don't have any skill. You're just taught to rush forward, but it's not 2011 or 2007 UFC anymore. You don't win fights just by hitting hard, throwing overhands, and being aggressive. He's going up against an undefeated 13-0 Murzakanov, so this could be a tough matchup for Menifield, although I do like the matchup for him. Given that this fight is overseas, Murzakanov is going to be on his home turf, or, second home for these guys, these Russian guys. And we'll see what happens. I'll come with an official prediction video during fight week for that one. But crazy main card. This is more stacked than UFC 301. Overall, more name value than UFC 302. And, crazy card for a fight night especially. You got Cory Sandhagen and Umar in the main event. Nick Diaz and Luque as a 5-round co-main. Chito Vera, Deiveson Figueiredo, which is not a title eliminator, but, whoever wins could work their way up towards a number 1 contenders fight. Tony Ferguson and Michael Chiesa, probably a retirement fight for both of them. Mackenzie Dern and Loopy Godinez, and Alonzo Menifield against Azamat Murzakanov. One other thought that I had about this is that it seems like Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia are kind of just having a pissing match over who can put on the coolest fights. These are fight nights that are happening, and we're getting, this month, we're getting Rob Whittaker and Khamzat, and on the same card, Volkov and Pavlovich. But just about a month and a half later, we're getting this card, which is a pay-per-view. If you throw a title fight on top of this, it's a stacked pay-per-view. Now, as far as the main event goes, I'm much more interested in Khamzat versus Whittaker than I am in Cory versus Umar, even though I'm very interested in Cory and Umar. But for the card as a whole, I'm much more interested in this Abu Dhabi card. So let me know your thoughts down below. What fight are you most excited for on Abu Dhabi? Are you more excited for the Saudi Arabia card or the Abu Dhabi card? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you want access to extra content aside from my regular videos, click the link in the description down below to become a channel member and get access to members-only live streams and other bonus perks. Or click the join button on our channel homepage. And if you're interested in some non-MMA content from me, check out my weekly podcast, the Hissyfit podcast, and check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World. I'll have them both linked in the description down below. Go watch this suggested video, and I'll see you next time.